So it is the 1st of April. We're protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Just started up the camera again to record what, if anything, happens. Vous êtes de retour? Ça, c'est le journaliste, oui, vous avez reconnu? Ok, bonjour. Joyeuse Pâques, whatever. So yeah, I had a little conversation with this guy earlier. He knows that I've been protesting for the better part of 20 years. He knew that there'd been a CTV news report way back in 1998 when I first started protesting. He complimented me on my perseverance, which is always nice. You know, the Unitarians call it an obsession, but in fact, the people who are truly obsessed are the Unitarians who are obsessed with ignoring my protest and not doing anything to deal responsibly with the issues that I'm protesting against. They're basically obsessed with trying to pretend that they're squeaky clean and don't have any clergy abuse problems worth protesting about, which simply is not true. But they're deep psychological denial, willful ignorance, and so on and so forth. You know, they just cannot bring themselves to deal with reality. It's like not like I'm saying things that aren't supported by pretty solid evidence. You know, in some cases, incontrovertible evidence. You know, everything I'm saying about the Unitarian Church of Montreal, the larger Unitarian Universalist religious community, the clergy abuse problems within the community and how they're very badly handled as a rule by the church are all supported by strong evidence. You know, certain Unitarian Universalist ministers have been charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. You can be sure that for every Unitarian Universalist minister or Sunday school teacher for that matter who was charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia and or rape, that there are others who were not charged, tried, and convicted, who may never even got to court, who may never have even been reported to the police. You know, the cases that are known are just the tip of the iceberg. There are certainly other cases, and then if you broaden out clergy sexual misconduct, you know, into the less serious forms, you know, Unitarian Universalist ministers having affairs with the wives of congregants and so on and so forth. You know, basically sexual predator Unitarian Universalist ministers, or not even, you know, the sexual predator ones, you know, but the ones that go a little bit too far with, you know, sexual harassment or whatever. You know, there's lots of that. Literally hundreds of Unitarian Universalist congregations have been affected by that kind of clergy sexual misconduct. And then there's the non-sexual clergy misconduct, the verbal and psychological abuse, and so on, the intolerance and the bigotry and so on by Unitarian Universalist ministers. The Unitarian Church just basically doesn't do anything about it. And the worst part too is they outright deny clergy abuse, you know, sometimes when it's obvious that it's happened, but they pretend it hasn't happened. One of the worst cases of that, as far as I'm concerned, is when UUA moderator Jim Key stood up in front of hundreds of Unitarian Universalists during the 2014 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and he delivered what was supposed to be an official UUA board apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. But the apology, it minimized everything. It you know, basically pretended it was just a few cases and you know, it wasn't all that serious and so on. And the worst part is that Jim Key outright denied any sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers, even though I had told him about cases of pedophilia and rape where ministers were charged, tried, and convicted. And I could have told him about a few more that I didn't. So he had from me information about cases where ministers were charged, tried, and convicted of sexual abuse of children, and yet he stood up in front of hundreds of Unitarian Universalists, indeed thousands. There was a few thousand. I think it was 3,000 to 4,000 Unitarian Universalists in this big auditorium, and he said the following words in his so-called apology: "There were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations." Those are his exact words. There were no incidents of abuse of children in my investigations. I'm omitting the elders there. He was told by me, and I'm sure he was told by other people, that there had in fact been cases of pedophilia and rape of children, and yet he stood up and lied to Unitarians in what was supposed to be an apology. Yeah. April Fools too. Yeah, I know, it's quite windy. Have a good one. So this is a guy who has seen my protest for quite some time, and he sometimes comments, and he's usually quite nice. Basically joking about how I'll be flying with the wind going on my picket signs, and he's right, the picket signs are certainly flying. Anyhow, we'll continue to circulate here. I have an observer on the other side of the street, which isn't such a bad thing, you know. It wouldn't hurt to have someone observing the protest just to see what does happen, and we will, as I said, continue for up until around noon, and then we're pretty well going to be done unless something unusual happens. So 7 minutes. You know, it's basically pretty quiet because the service is happening. There's not many late arrivals anymore in terms of the Unitarians. You know, things could potentially happen in terms of the public, but it's pretty quiet in terms of pedestrians. So I may shut down the video to conserve the battery power so that I can record later when people are exiting the church. Essentially, my idea is I will wait until people are coming out of the church. You know, basically, people will see the picket signs as they come out of the church, and then we'll be done. I would expect them to start coming out at around 11:45, up until around 12:15. I mean, some will come out maybe even later, but there's a communion thing at 11:45. They do it once a year on Easter, and so I would expect people to stay around for the communion. I would expect that to take a few minutes, but people may stick around after. So anyway, I just want to be protesting when people come out, and then I will consider it a successful Easter Sunday, April Fool's Day protest for 2018, and heading towards 20th anniversary of my protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, which I will be celebrating sometime in May, or I may put off the celebration until early June, but I'll do something to observe 20 years of protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and Unitarian Universalist anti-religious intolerance and bigotry, and various other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which includes now repeated abusive misuse, that's what I'm looking for, of the criminal justice system. False criminal charges against me in an effort to shut down my protest, to deprive me of my ability to engage in peaceful public protest, and even to prevent me from blogging and tweeting and so on about Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse. So that's it for this segment, and we're going to shut it down. I'm just waiting for these cars to pass so they can see the signs as they go by. And I think I'll shut down the camera for a little bit, start it up again when it looks like there may be some interactions.